The Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association says the cigarette ban is illogical. Senior counsel for FITA, Arnold Subel, told the Pretoria High Court that the rise in illegal cigarette sales affects the most vulnerable in society. The case against the tobacco ban under lockdown is currently underway. FITA argues that the ban is invalid and unconstitutional. The prohibition has been in place since the 26th of March.
As a stance that the way you're going to stop illicit traders is you stop people smoking, and the price will then reduce, and that will drive people out of the market. You just got to say that to see how absurd it is. But if you accept on a clinical basis, on a common cause, uncontroversial basis, that it is a medical condition, that with respect means you can't simply guillotine it and say, well, go to the pharmacy and over the counter you can get nicotine substitutes. That's her solution. Or self-help lines. On no stretch of the imagination can there be a rational approach to this. And why it's important is because when we consider whether or not smoking has indeed stopped or been reduced to the necessary extent, it doesn't matter if it's harmful or not. The question this court has to consider, can it be rationally justified on the basis that smoking will have ceased? But you can't just cease it. You can't simply switch off day one of a lockdown and say you may not get cigarettes anymore.
Now, for more on the story, we cross now live to our senior politics reporter, Ziyanda Ngcobo from the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, who is following the story for us. Ziyanda, thank you so much for your time. Good afternoon. I know that there is a break. Now, before the break, we were hearing from the state's advocate, Moerane, who was saying that the state has a duty to take steps to reduce the burden on the health system. Now, he was also arguing repeatedly around the rationality and the necessity of restricting the sale of tobacco, of which FITA is completely against. Tell us more about what transpired this morning.
Well, certainly the state advocate, that is Maruma Moerane SC, was basically outlining the duties that have been, espoused upon Cooperative Governance Minister Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma in terms of that Disaster Management Act and the responsibilities that have been outlined. He was basically arguing that she would have been acting against her constitutional obligation if she did not move swiftly in addressing some of the issues at hand, i.e. banning the sale of cigarettes, because the argument here is that that is for health reasons. He even went as far as saying that there is no luxury of time for inquiries that would, of course, need you to actually ponder upon issues, and saying that the fact that we are in a pandemic is a fact that should not be forgotten. But of course, we saw that Judge President Dunstan Mlambo losing his patience a bit there with Advocate Moerane when he was actually reading some of the contents of that World Health Organization paper, which has been relied upon to justify the ban on the sale of cigarettes, with the Judge President saying he wanted a response from Moerane with regards to FITA's argument. FITA, earlier on through their advocate Sunil, was basically saying that the state must respond to why they're continuing with the ban when actually we've seen that many smokers have not stopped smoking cigarettes, and in effect, how is this actually proving to save lives and as a health precautionary measure? And so we're yet to hear from Moerane and how he's going to respond to this, because the logic here from FITA is that, well, if people are continuing to smoke and the ban is not working, essentially what is government trying to achieve? They've also raised the contradictions in the fact that the sale on alcohol has been allowed, and yet the ban on cigarettes remains. Advocate Sunil is basically saying that it seems as though the Cooperative Governance Minister is obsessed with tobacco, and in fact he's described the regulation and the continued ban as draconian.
Now, has he in fact touched on the fact that FITA kept on saying that COGTA Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma acted beyond her legal power as prescribed in the National Disaster Management Act? Did he have time to argue that point?
No, he hasn't. I mean, Tammy, Advocate Moerane only began his submissions, towards 1 o'clock, which, of course, as you can tell now, it is the lunch break. But I can actually outline to you some of the key arguments that FITA has made. It's the one that I've touched on now regarding, the effectiveness of the ban on the sale of alcohol, but also the health literature, or the medical literature that has been used by the cooperative governance minister in continuing that ban on the sale of alcohol, on cigarettes, I should say. Basically, FITA is arguing that this literature, especially with the one from the World Health Organization, is inconclusive, and that even the World Health Organization itself has said that it's constantly evaluating its research, and therefore FITA is saying there is no rational decision that can be based off evidence that is constantly evolving. Another key argument that they have made, which is quite interesting, is the fact that the president has not signed or deposed an affidavit in this particular matter, despite being the first respondent. And actually, the advocate representing FITA was asked why this is significant, and he actually told the court that it's important because it was the president who had actually made the announcement on the ban on the sale of cigarettes, and therefore they would have also wanted to hear his rationale behind actually continuing this ban, because remember there was that U-turn. He had said that under lockdown level 4 the sale of cigarettes would be allowed, and then a few days later the cooperative governance minister announced a different decision, and so they wanted an explanation from the president what exactly happened there.
Now, notwithstanding Judge President Mlambo's irritation there a few minutes ago, what is likely to happen after the break?
Well, we're still going to hear from Advocate Moerane, and he still actually has to, again, explain, the rationale and the logic behind, the continued ban on the sale of cigarettes, in particular when it comes to the medical literature and the expert advice that has been relied upon to continue with this ban. And, of course, the court has even asked, the advocates how they would like the courts to interpret this medical literature. We'd heard from the advocates representing FITA that they were saying that Dlamini-Zuma is not a medical expert, and therefore she has no jurisdiction or even knowledge to actually make pronouncements on matters that have such far-reaching implications. So we're going to hear from Advocate Moerane on what their key arguments are, because so far what we've heard is the arguments on the necessity around the ban on the continued sale of cigarettes, and of course we've just begun actually hearing why, where exactly also this advice and what type of advice was given to the cooperative governance minister which has actually led her to maintain the ban on the sale of cigarettes, despite the fact that alcohol is now being sold during lockdown level 3.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, thank you so much for that analysis for us.